Well folks, apparently this channel has become ground zero for the crusade against Roc Nation and their corruption. Whether it's their manipulation in the Tory Lanez case, or Desiree Perez going after her own daughter, Demore Hadley, to even now with this case where Jay-Z sued an attorney for defamation and extortion over the attorney representing a client who wanted to sue Jay-Z for assaulting her. It's just crazy times all around, and actually, I heard about this case over on X, and I asked y'all if you wanted to see me cover it, to which I got a resounding yes, so here we are covering it today. So buckle your seatbelts, ladies and gentlemen, because it is about to go down. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Scotty O, aka the Gen Z attorney, and I currently work as a civil and criminal litigation attorney, and I make videos on this channel covering high-profile court cases, really break them down, pull the curtain back, and let y'all know what's really going on with them. And as I said in today's video, we're covering this lawsuit between Jay-Z and Tony Buzbee, and the most recent development being that all of Jay-Z's claims have been dismissed by a judge. And so if you like this kind of content covering Roc Nation and all their craziness, then be sure to drop a like down below to let me know. If you like coverage on these high profile celebrity cases, then subscribe to come back for more. And last but not least, I'd love to connect with y'all, so drop some comments down below, get talking about this case, I'll be down there talking with you, or just hit me up over on X, because that's where the idea for this video came from, and maybe your idea will be next. But either way, without further ado, let's jump into this video. Now the first thing we have to do here is understand who our major players are in this case. First of which being Tony Buzbee. Now Tony Buzbee is a hotshot, big-time lawyer who has an extensive history of being involved in these high-profile celebrity cases, and most recently has built quite the name for himself as being the go-to attorney for anyone who claims to have been victimized by P Diddy over the years. That reputation has since led to him taking on over 100 clients and filing civil lawsuits against Diddy for all different types of allegations. Naturally, as the guy suing Diddy, he was approached by a woman who claims that back in 2000, when she was 13 years old, she was sexually assaulted by both P Diddy and Jay-Z. Of course, this led Tony Buzbee to filing lawsuit against both Jay-Z and Diddy, which then led to Jay-Z denying the claims and even going so far as to call the entire lawsuit blackmail and calling the demand letters that Buzbee was sending him so threatening that they rose to the level of extortion. Now that's an important word there, because extortion is not just a word you throw around lightly, it is an actual criminal offense. And so if you're going to use that word seriously, you need to be able to back it up. But anyway, right, the suit was initially filed back in late 2024, with the victim remaining anonymous, just filing as a Jane Doe. But then we fast forward to February 14, 2025, when Jane Doe, our victim, decides to withdraw the lawsuit and have it voluntarily dismissed with prejudice, meaning she could not file it again even if she wanted to. Now granted, there's a lot of different reasons for why a plaintiff may want to dismiss a lawsuit, even dismiss it with prejudice. One of which, of course, being that the allegations just simply never happened. That's certainly a possibility. But it may also have been the case that the allegations were true, there just simply was not enough evidence to actually prove it at trial. Remember, one of my favorite sayings on this channel is that the law is not about what you know, it's about what you can prove. And when you've got allegations of a sexual assault from 25 years ago, you're not going to have any forensic evidence, so you'd have to have some really strong circumstantial and contemporaneous evidence back from the time of that would corroborate the allegations. And it's very possible that she simply did not have this evidence and just decided it was not going to be worth the extra time and money and all the hassle of this being a high-profile case like this. She just basically decided, right, it's not worth it anymore. I want to withdraw. I'm not proceeding anymore. The lawsuit gets dismissed February 14, 2025, which naturally leads Jay-Z and Diddy's legal teams to call this a victory and saying that this was all built on falsehoods to begin with. But our story does not end there, because not long after, Jay-Z decides to countersue Tony Buzbee for extortion and defamation, claiming that by filing the suit, Tony Buzbee was attempting to harm his family and his brand and his business, and actually did harm those things by causing significant emotional distress to Jay-Z and over $20 million in business damage. And these are two serious claims he's making, right? We're talking about defamation and extortion. On defamation grounds, it is a bit of a different set of rules that we're working with here because we're dealing with public figures. Famous Supreme Court case called New York Times versus Sullivan basically holds that the only way that you can defame a public figure is if you make your statement with actual malice, meaning you know what you're saying is false, but you're making it anyway in an attempt to harm the public figure. So that's something we would need to keep in mind here, is that did Tony Buzbee make these claims, make these public statements knowing that they were false, and doing so with the intent to harm Jay-Z? That's the first prong of this. The second prong is the extortion side. And already Jay-Z's on pretty weak footing here, because if you want to take his definition of extortion, then anytime a lawyer sends a demand letter, that's extortion, because demand letters in their very nature are letters that you send before any litigation gets filed, before any lawsuit is filed. A lawyer will send the other side a demand letter stating, we have this claim against you, we are prepared to file this case, but we can save everyone the time, the money, and the trouble if we can just settle this. We can agree to some sort of agreement out of court to usually some monetary amount, and if that gets paid out, we can agree on that, then we will never file this lawsuit. That's standard, conventional, that's just how demand letters work. If you want to talk about extortion, extortion is usually the threat of some sort of criminal activity, saying you need to do what I want you to do, or I'm going to do something illegal to you as a way of harming you. That's the typical way in which extortion works. Alright, already the extortion claims here are just super weak, and the judge recognized that because at the first hearing that was had on this case, which was Buzbee filing an anti-SLAPP motion, the judge dismissed all the extortion claims and dismissed most of the defamation claims. Now, SLAPP gets a little complicated, but the basic gist of it is that these SLAPP laws exist for public figures to give them some form of First Amendment protection for them to be able to speak on matters of public concern and not be worried about defamation cases just being thrown at them left and right to bankrupt them. And naturally, Buzbee, who is very well familiar with how SLAPP works, filed an anti-SLAPP motion seeking to have these charges dismissed, which, as I said, the judge did grant by dismissing all the extortion claims and most of the defamation claims, with his reasoning being that this extortion, it's kind of like I was saying earlier, was not really extortion. It was just protected litigation activity. It was him making a demand saying, if you pay my client this amount of money, we won't file the lawsuit. That's how civil litigation works. However, there were a few claims that were left over that under the New York Times versus Sullivan standard, it was arguable, at least at that point in the proceedings, that maybe there was actual malice involved based on some of the statements that Buzbee was making publicly as to whether or not he knew that these claims were actually false, yet decided to speak on them anyway in a way intended to harm Jay-Z. However, fast forward to July 2025, our most recent updates, and the reason I'm making this video today is that the judge finally put his foot down and dismissed all the claims, and reasoning that not dismissing the claims would amount to an unconstitutional restriction on Buzbee's free speech. And once again, that the demand letters just did not rise to the level of actual extortion. It was protected litigation activity. And Jay-Z's team is taking issue with the ruling, and they're planning on appealing it because they're arguing that there was evidence that was excluded that should not have been excluded, which, to be fair to them, right, this is some pretty important evidence here. What Jay-Z's team was able to do here was, through their investigators, they were able to speak with the alleged victim from the original case, the one that claimed Jay-Z assaulted her. And the investigators stated that in their conversation with this victim, she admitted that none of this was true, and she knew none of it was true. And therefore, Tony Buzbee knew none of it was true. So Jay-Z's team was trying to use her statement in court as the evidence that, look, Buzbee knew this wasn't true. She told him it wasn't true, yet he filed it anyway, which, right, maybe gives them grounds for actual malice here for defamation. However, the court correctly excluded those statements from coming into evidence because they're hearsay. You can't have an investigator testify as to what someone else told them. Hearsay is an out-of-court statement offered for the truth of the matter asserted. And this victim's statements to the investigators fulfill both those prongs. It is hearsay, so the only way that her statements could come into evidence would be if she came in and actually testified herself against Tony Buzbee. But sounds like she was unwilling to do that, which means the statements must be excluded. And so yeah, with those statements excluded, there really was just no door left available to prove any sort of defamation claim against Buzbee. Hence, the judge dismissed all the claims. And with this ruling, Buzbee has now come out and stated that, first off, he of course agrees with the ruling. Of course, naturally, the case was dismissed against him. But now, based on the dismissal, that he's going to be seeking attorney's fees, which, whoa, that's going to be a lot of money right there. But yeah, overall, quite an interesting little case here, talking about, right, different standards for defamation, different standards for extortion, and considering, right, apparently this has become the #1 anti-Roc Nation channel, and we are going after them in every way we can. Felt like this is something worth talking about. So yeah, as of now, we'll have to wait and see how the appeal goes. My anticipation, my prediction now is that the appeal is really not going to go anywhere, and that this dismissal is going to stand. But y'all have to let me know when an update happens, and I'll be happy to cover it. But that's all it's going to be for today's video, so if you learned something new, then be sure to drop a like down below to let me know to make more. And if you like this kind of content covering these high-profile celebrity cases, then be sure to subscribe to come back for more. And last but not least, let me know what y'all think about this case here, what y'all think about Jay-Z and Roc Nation and their claims against Buzbee, or if there's anything else that Roc Nation's been up to that you want me to look into. As I said, this video came about based on an X post that I made, and so the best way for your idea to get covered on this channel would be to either leave it down in the comment or go follow on X and let's connect over there. But yeah, for all y'all who made it this far to the end of the video, y'all are really the best. You're my OGs for sure. And I look forward to seeing everybody on the next one.